I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. Last month, I started hearing someone on the other side of my bedroom wall, breathing in perfect sync with me every night. There's no apartment on that side. Just brick, and whatever has been matching my breathing, breath, for the past 4 weeks. I moved into my apartment almost 2 years ago, a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an older building, end unit, which I specifically liked because it meant only having one shared wall instead of 2. That wall, according to the building layout, backed directly onto solid exterior brick, no adjoining apartment, no shared space of any kind on the other side. About a month ago, lying in bed one night, I started noticing a faint sound coming from that wall. Slow, steady breathing, matching my own pace almost exactly, close enough that at first I assumed it was some strange echo of my own breath bouncing back at me through the old plaster. I pressed my ear against the wall to test the theory. The breathing continued clearly, distinctly separate from my own, perfectly synchronized with each inhale and exhale I took, as though whatever was making the sound was actively listening to me and matching its own breathing precisely to mine in real time. Checking the wall. I called the building manager the next morning, asking directly if there was any space on the other side of my bedroom wall, a maintenance shaft, an old sealed unit, anything that might explain the sound. He confirmed what I already suspected from the building's layout, that wall backed directly onto solid exterior brick, with nothing behind it except open air 3 stories above the street. I asked if any other tenants had ever reported similar sounds. He hesitated slightly before saying no, though something in his tone made me suspect he wasn't being entirely honest, or perhaps simply didn't want to encourage what he assumed was an overactive imagination in a newish tenant. That night, the breathing returned at almost exactly the same time as before, matching my own breathing pace precisely from the moment I lay down until I eventually fell asleep. I woke up several times throughout the night, and each time, the breathing was there, patient and steady, perfectly synced to whatever pace my own breath happened to settle into. Testing it. Over the following week, I started experimenting, unable to simply accept the sound without trying to understand it better. I deliberately changed my breathing pattern, faster, slower, holding my breath entirely for as long as I could manage. Every single time, the sound on the other side of the wall adjusted within a few seconds, matching whatever new pattern I'd shifted to, holding its own breath exactly when I held mine, resuming at precisely the moment I resumed, close enough in timing that it felt less like an echo and more like something directly, deliberately mirroring me. I stopped testing it after I held my breath for nearly 30 seconds one night, watching the clock, waiting to see how long the sound on the other side would also stay silent. It matched me for the full 30 seconds without a single audible breath, exactly as long as I managed to hold mine, releasing its own breath in the same instant I finally released my own. I didn't sleep well after that particular test. Something about proving the synchronization so precisely made the whole situation feel less like an unexplained noise and considerably more like an unexplained presence, actively paying very close attention. Talking to the wall. About 2 weeks in, driven by a mixture of exhaustion and desperation, I did something I still can't fully explain rationally. I spoke to the wall directly, quietly, asking whoever or whatever was on the other side what they wanted, or why they were matching my breathing so precisely every single night. There was no verbal response, not exactly. But the breathing pattern changed for the first time since I'd noticed it. Instead of simply matching my own breath, it began breathing in a distinct rhythm, 3 short breaths followed by one long one, repeating steadily regardless of what pattern I tried afterward. It took me a horrifying moment to recognize that specific rhythm as identical to a breathing exercise I'd been taught years earlier by a childhood therapist, something deeply personal I hadn't consciously thought about in over a decade and had certainly never mentioned to anyone in this city, let alone written down or spoken aloud anywhere near this apartment. I didn't speak to the wall again after that night. Escalation. The breathing continued nightly, and around the 3rd week, something changed again. In addition to the breathing, I began hearing, very faintly, what sounded like someone quietly repeating a name. Not my name, a name I didn't immediately recognize, spoken so softly I initially wasn't certain I was hearing actual words rather than simply the ambient sound of an old building settling. After several nights of trying to make out the name clearly, I finally understood it. It was my own childhood nickname, one used exclusively by my grandmother, who had passed away nearly 15 years earlier, a nickname I was certain nobody currently in my life even knew existed. I moved out of my bedroom that same week, sleeping on my living room couch instead, telling myself it was simply more comfortable, refusing to admit even privately that I was avoiding that wall entirely. The breathing followed me. Not through the living room wall specifically, but somehow present regardless of which room I chose to sleep in, always perfectly synchronized, always patient, always close enough to hear clearly no matter how far I physically moved myself from the original bedroom wall. Now, I've started looking into moving out entirely, though something about the situation makes me deeply uneasy about whether that would actually solve anything, given that the sound has already demonstrated it isn't strictly limited to that one original wall. I asked the building manager again, more directly this time, if he knew anything about a previous tenant who might explain the nickname, or any history connected to my specific unit that might account for what's happening. He grew noticeably uncomfortable, eventually admitting that the tenant before me had also moved out abruptly, breaking her lease early without much explanation beyond citing personal reasons, and refusing all follow-up contact from the building afterward. I haven't been able to track her down to ask what she experienced. Some part of me isn't sure I actually want to know, worried that whatever answer she might give would only confirm something I'm already dreading rather than offering any actual resolution or comfort. I still hear the breathing every night now, regardless of which room I choose, regardless of how I try to disrupt the pattern. It still matches me precisely, breath for breath, patient and unhurried, occasionally still whispering that childhood nickname softly enough that I sometimes wonder if I'm imagining it entirely, though I know, with growing certainty, that I'm not. I don't know what it actually wants, or why it seems to know details about my life that nobody currently around me could possibly know. I only know that it's patient in a way that feels less like haunting and more like waiting, for what, specifically, I genuinely don't know, and I'm increasingly afraid of what happens on the night I finally find out.